Good morning, Enlace. I hope everyone's having a great morning. My name is Alicia, and I'm the Vice Chair of Enlace. And I just want to welcome everyone to our general meeting today. Let you know a couple of announcements. We had our first digital resource fair, which went over very well, and had a great response from that. So we're talking about doing another virtual resource fair, so be on the look for that. And if you're not already a member of Enlace, go over to enlacecharlotte.org and you'll find out information about becoming a member. And that way you can be connected to our resource hub, and that's where all of our information is. So you can find out information about upcoming vaccine clinics, upcoming events that different organizations are having. All of our resources are going to be in that resource hub. So if you're not already a member of Enlace, get in touch with me or one of the other board members, and we'll definitely talk to you more about it. And right now, I'm going to turn it over to Ruth, who is going to introduce Alma. Ruth is our Legal and Public Safety Committee Chair. Throughout the presentation today, if you have any questions or comments, please feel free to put those in the comments on Facebook. But go ahead, I'll turn it over to Ruth, and she's going to do our vision and mission today.
So again, good morning to all who are joining us. The mission is to develop and strengthen connections through information, collaboration, and partnership with organizations and leaders who serve the Latinx community. And our vision is to enhance social capital within the Latinx community in the Charlotte metro area. And now I would like to then introduce Alma Hernandez, who is our Civic Engagement Chair, who will then introduce the speakers that we have for today.
Thank you, Ruth. Good morning, everybody. Thanks for joining us. We do have two presenters today. Our first one is Leonardo Scarpati. Leo is a principal consultant for L5 Consultants, a firm that specializes in multicultural community engagement and cultural diversity and inclusion training. With over 10 years experience in program management with an emphasis in multicultural communities, Leo is committed to helping bridge cultural differences in a globalized area. Leo is currently chair of the Latino Civic Engagement Committee. This is a nonpartisan group working to increase voter participation among the Hispanic Latino voters, connect Hispanic Latino communities with their elected officials and vice versa, and to develop Hispanic Latino leaders and candidates for elected or appointed offices. So please welcome Leonardo Scarpati. He's going to be doing a Civics one-on-one for us today.
Good morning, everyone. Bienvenidos a todos. Buenos días. I am going to try to share my screen. Please let me know. Are you able to see my screen?
Yes, we can see it.
Okay, great.
Perfect.
Thank you. Great, thank you. So thank you, Alma, for the introduction. As Alma said, my name is Leo Scarpati with L5 Consultants. And today I want to talk briefly about Civics 101. So when people ask about, what is it, the federal government, how does it work? So what I want to do is I want to give you a little bit brief background and some history on how it started, where it started, what our guiding documents are. And I'm sure this is a refresher for many people, but if this is new for you or just a little bit more detailed information, I hope this is helpful in understanding the workings of government. So here we start with the US Constitution. So the United States Constitution was written in 1787, and it's the world's largest surviving written charter of government. This document actually establishes the legislative, executive, and judicial branches of government. These are the three guiding branches that make the US government what they are. And one of the interesting things that the founding fathers put was in its first three words, "We the people," affirm that the government of the United States exists to serve its citizens. The first three articles of the Constitution actually established those three branches of government. So the first three articles of the Constitution established the legislative branch, the executive branch, and the judicial branch in that order. Then we have what's known as the Bill of Rights. The Bill of Rights are the first 10 amendments that constitute the first 10 amendments. The Constitution has evolved to meet the changing needs of modern society and has been amended 27 times, the last being in 1992. It's a very arduous process to make an amendment and to make changes to the Constitution, which is why I think it's one of the longest surviving written charters of government. It's not easy. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, it's 2/3. It needs 2/3 of Congress just to hear a reason for hear an argument for why there needs to be a change or an amendment to the Constitution. So the Constitution, we spoke about the different branches of government. So first we have the legislative branch. And the legislative branch gives us two bodies called chambers or houses. First, the Senate and the House of Representatives. And they're the ones that make the laws. So I know a lot of people just want to say, well, the president does this and the president does that. Congress is the one who makes the laws. And both these chambers together are known as Congress. So the position of Congress at the beginning of the Constitution affirms its statute as the first branch of federal government. The founding fathers always imagined Congress leading this country and why they have the power to make laws. The Constitution assigned to Congress responsibility for organizing the executive and judicial branches. They also raise revenue, aka our taxes. They're able to declare war and making all laws necessary for executing these powers. Under the Constitution, the two chambers are equal. Neither can declare laws without the other, so they need to work with one another. And I think that's one of the things that we see most nowadays in the gridlock in Washington is that sometimes the chambers have different points of opinion depending on who is leading them. And it can cause there to be some friction, and that unfortunately causes a stalemate for a lot of laws that can be passed or go through. But then it also creates a lot of dialogue to make sure that things aren't passed just to be passed. Although they are equal, the Constitution does give a certain exclusive powers to each chamber. So I want to take a quick second and just look at the Senate. So to understand the Senate's really interesting because one, there's only 100 Senate members, 2 from each state. So when the founding fathers were designing this, and I don't know if they had in frame that there were going to be 50 states at one point, right? But it was 13 states, and they wanted to make sure that no matter the size of the state, no matter the size of the population, there was equal representation in the Senate. So they drafted that 2 senators represent each state. The Senate is supposed to be the body of Congress that is more poised, that is slower moving, doesn't react as quickly as the other. So they actually have elected terms of 6 years. And the reason why the founding fathers put this into effect was they didn't want senators to feel a political pressure or be swayed by emotions of elections. So that's why we have the Senate on 6-year terms. And 1/3 of the Senate seats are actually open every 2 years. So every 2 years, we have elections for Congress, and 1/3 of the Senate goes through that process. Now, some of the requirements to be a U.S. Senator would be being minimum 30 years of age, a citizen of the United States for 9 years, excuse me, and a resident of the state that's represented at the time of the election. Exclusive powers that the Senate has is, and these are very important, nominees chosen by the president to serve as judges, ambassadors, cabinet officers, and senior executives must be confirmed by the Senate. So whenever the president wants to appoint either a federal judge, someone to the Supreme Court, ambassadors, or just even their cabinet officers, their senior executives, they must go through a process of being confirmed by the Senate. Now, depending on who's in which political party is in power, it can be an easy process for the appointees of that president, or if it's the opposition, sometimes they can make it a little bit tougher. But it is a process, a vigorous process, in order to screen out candidates and make sure that we have the right people in place around the president of the United States. Another piece that's exclusive powers to the Senate is that treaties negotiated with foreign nations, must be ratified by the Senate. So the House has no formal role in either of these two processes. Now, let's take a look at the House. So the House of Representatives actually is made up of 435 House members, and they are elected to 2-year terms. The reason why we have a fixed 435 is because there's a varying number of members per state, and that's based on the state's population. The number of congressional seats are redrawn every 10 years using census data. And why it's really important that last year Enlace was working on the census, because we wanted to make sure that everybody was counted correctly in North Carolina. And just to give you a brief snapshot, currently North Carolina has 13 congressional seats, but is projected to gain a 14th seat when the final census data is available. It's not guaranteed, but it's projected that North Carolina will get an additional congressional seat. Which is important. It's important when we're talking about power in the House, when we're talking about political power, and then when we're also talking about electoral votes, because the electoral votes of how the president is elected are based on the number of members of Congress that each state has. So currently, the state of North Carolina has 15 electoral votes. If the North Carolina gets their 14th congressional seat, at the next presidential election, we will have 16 electoral votes. And I believe there's only 6 or 7 other states with more than 16 electoral votes. So it will poise North Carolina to be a power player again in the presidential election. The Constitution gives the House the authority to originate all revenue bills. And through a historical precedent, this authority has been extended to all appropriation bills, which are the spending bills, as well as money that's been assigned, such as such as the tax revenue and spending bills. Although money bills must begin in the House, the Senate has the full opportunity to debate and modify the legislation sent to it by the House, as well as all bills. Both chambers must pass a bill before it gets sent to the president for signature and being signed into law. So let's look at some of the requirements to be a congressperson. So a congressperson, minimum age of 25 years old, a citizen of the United States for 7 years, and a resident of the state represented at the time. I do want to highlight something that in the United States, to be a representative of the United States or a U.S. senator, one does not have to be a natural born citizen of the United States. As it says, citizenship for 7 years with the United States for a House rep. So one can be a naturalized citizen, and in the House, I believe it's 9 years that you have to be a citizen of the United States before you can run for the Senate. So let's talk a little bit about the executive branch. So the executive branch is mostly known for the presidency. So the presidency of the United States is housed in the executive branch. And when the members of Congress, when the founding fathers decided to put this together, they made the executive branch the second article in the Constitution. So that's where it outlines the role of the president, the vice president, the cabinet. And I don't think they had in mind federal agencies, but it's been expanded to that. So we have the executive branch carries out and enforces the laws. So this is why it's important. So we have Congress who makes the laws, and then we have the executive branch that carries out and enforces said laws. The president leads the country. He or she is the head of state. So they are the representative of the United States amongst other nations, leader of the federal government, and commander-in-chief of the United States Armed Forces. The president serves 4-year terms and cannot be elected to more than 2 terms. Now, the vice president plays a role in supporting the president. If the president is unable to serve, then the vice president becomes president. The vice president can be elected and serve an unlimited number of 4-year terms as vice president, even under different presidents. And I believe it's happened in the past where someone has served 3 years as vice president, but please don't quote me. I believe it was someone was vice president under 2 administrations. So then we have the cabinet members, and the cabinet members are a key role to the presidency and the executive branch because they serve as key advisors to the president of the United States. They include the vice president, heads of executive departments, and other high-ranking government officials. Cabinet members are nominated by the president and must be approved by a simple majority of 51 votes of the 100 votes from the Senate. So it's a little bit different. All they need is a majority plus 1. Much of the work of the executive branch is actually done by federal agencies, departments, committees, and other groups. So when we're talking about the Department of Revenue, the Department of Labor, and those are the federal agencies that we're talking about, the Department of Justice. So when we start talking about law enforcement, the Department of Justice, Department of Homeland Security, just to name a few, there's 15 to 20 federal agencies, and I did not want to bore everyone by going, one by one with each of them, but I did want to give you an example of those federal agencies. And they are under the direction of the executive branch led by the President of the United States. The third branch of government, we have the judicial branch. And the judicial branch, excuse me, is mostly known for the highest court in the land, which is the Supreme Court. So the important part about the judicial branch is that it interprets the meaning of the law. So I just want to go back. We have Congress who creates or makes the laws. We have the executive branch or the presidency or federal agencies who enforce the law. And then we have the judicial branch that interprets the meaning of the laws, applies laws to individual cases, and decides if laws violate the Constitution. It is comprised of the Supreme Court and other federal courts. The Supreme Court justice is the highest court in the United States. The justices of the Supreme Court are nominated by the president and must be approved by the Senate. 9 members make up the Supreme Court, a chief justice and 8 associate justices. There must be a minimum quorum of 6 justices to decide a case. If there is an even number of justices and a case results in a tie, a lower court's decision will stand. So it's really interesting how we get to the Supreme Court, and I'll explain that in the next slide. But I did want to mention that there is no fixed term for justices. They serve until their death, retirement, or removal in exceptional circumstances. The Constitution gives Congress the authority to establish other federal courts to handle cases that involve federal laws, including tax and bankruptcy, lawsuits involving the U.S. and state governments, or the Constitution. Other federal judicial agencies and programs support the courts and research judicial policy. So there's a lot that goes into this. As I mentioned before, there are federal courts, there's federal courts of appeal. So I'll explain that a little bit more. And then there's a lot of judicial agencies, probably more than the ones that were under the federal agencies of the executive branch. And again, I did not want to just name them off. But in this slide here, I hope that everyone can understand how a case gets to the Supreme Court. So first, a case will be heard in a trial court, in a state trial court. And if one decides that they don't get a favorable verdict, they can appeal it in a state court. And if you don't get the results there and you want to take it to another level, you have the state Supreme Court. So every state has a Supreme Court, and this is the typical process. If it goes and you want to push it further, you can take it to a federal trial court. No, I'm sorry. These are the two different ways. So we have the state charges. So you can have charges either by the state, and this is the way to get to it. I apologize. So we have the state trial court, the state court of appeals, and then the state Supreme Court. And then from there, if you want to go further, you can go to the Supreme Court. Now, on the federal level, you have federal trial courts. You have the U.S. courts of appeal, and then they can be heard before the Supreme Court. Now, the Supreme Court receives 7,000 to 8,000 requests for review every year and only grants 70 to 80 oral arguments. The Supreme Court usually works from October, so their period usually goes from October till either late June or early July of the following year. It's the Supreme Court is one of those institutions that really makes a difference or really interprets the laws of that said Constitution. Now, I want to just open the floor up in case there are any questions. Alma or Maura, please let me know if there's any questions that I might be able to help answer.
I did have a question. It's actually for me. I was just wondering if you happen to know how many Latinx NCGA members there currently are.
I'm sorry, Latinx what?
Latinx NCGA members, like how many NC congressmen are Latinx? Do you happen to know?
Sure. Well, on a federal level in North Carolina, we do not have representation at Congress. There's no elected Latino congressperson in North Carolina. And in the General Assembly, which we can do in another presentation, talking about the government, the state government, we only have one representative at the time, and I believe he's out of Alamance County, North Carolina. So one thing that we do with the Latino Civic Engagement Committee is we encourage others to go ahead and participate. We ask them to come on over and we welcome them and help answer any questions that they may have in terms of wanting to either run for local, state, or federal office at one point. We want to be able to be a source or a resource for people to have conversations and kind of mull over their thoughts as to whether they want to be a public servant or not. Anything else, Alma?
Someone asked, you kind of covered it a little bit. How do we get more Latinos interested in politics?
Yeah, I mean, having conversations like this. I think having conversations like this is critical. I hope one of the things, and I just had a conversation with someone who is doing a newspaper article on the recent numbers from the 2020 election. Here in North Carolina, we have a lot of young folks who are registered voters, and the majority of our voting power is within our youth. If I'm not mistaken, the 18 to 29 crowd. So ways that we can engage our younger voters, one is by creating a cycle of voting, right? Creating a pattern of voting, creating a habit of voting, I think is critical. Once you're able to feel that your vote matters, the idea is that can spark an interest in wanting to serve a step further. I think the first level of service is voting. For those who want to be engaged a little bit more and want to take a role in leadership, there's always those opportunities. Unfortunately, at the moment, at the city of Charlotte, we do not have any representation on city council. The Latinx community here in the city of Charlotte is almost 20%, and we still don't have an elected official. So there's a lot of work for us to be able to do in the next election to hopefully get that representation. Now, what does representation mean for communities? When we talk about growing a community and having a voice in a community, that's one way of having it. By having someone who represents you and your community in those meetings at those levels and is an elected official. We do have one elected official at the county level. So I do want to recognize Susan Rodriguez McDowell, and she has been working on getting to better know the issues that are going on in the Hispanic Latino community. And if you have any questions, she's always been open. Her phone line, email is always open in case you have any questions or looking to work with our local elected officials. And that's one of the things that we want to do over at the Latino Civic Engagement Committee too. We want to be able to provide opportunities for our community to connect with our local elected officials. Now, when we're talking about connecting with and being a part of these processes, I do want to mention something, and I didn't get a chance to go through it because, like I said, the presentation can get a lot longer. But local government, I think, is really critical in how we do and how we show up. And there's an opportunity this Friday to meet with Assistant City Manager Taiwo, and I apologize, I will not mention his last name because I will probably butcher it. But NARAP, which is the National Association of Hispanic Real Estate Professionals, they are working with the Assistant City Manager on having a conversation on the 2040 plan. So the 2040 plan is really important from the city perspective as how do we see ourselves going over the next 20 years. Now, being that, like I said, the Hispanic Latino community is almost 20% of the city of Charlotte and we continue to grow, we need to be in these conversations and we need to be letting these city planners know how we want to, one, see the city grow and how we want to be a part of how this city grows. So I invite everyone, there's an opportunity. I sent out an email to the Enlace group this morning. Please feel free to register, it's free, and they will be streaming on Facebook Live also. So if you want to be able to connect, that'll be a great way. I hope people ask questions. Ask those tough questions. How is my neighborhood going to change over the next 20 years? Do I see myself living in the city of Charlotte over the next 20 years? And if so, how do I want to see the city grow? These are questions that we can be asking and telling from our perspective of our community.
Thank you, Leo. Can you share how someone can get in contact with you, the Latino Engagement Committee, here in chat, and then we can post it on the Facebook?
Yeah.
Thanks.
Well, I will just put my last slide, and I should have put the email address of the Latino Civic Engagement Committee. I apologize, but I do want to say thank you guys for having me here this morning. Here's my email address. Feel free to email me. It's lscarpati@l5online.com. And I'll be able to connect you with any of the information that I mentioned above. If you're interested in learning more about how you can be involved in local government and some of the local boards, I always recommend local boards, very important on how to get in the know. Please feel free to email me and I'll send you the information.
Thank you, Leo. Thank you for joining us this morning.
Thanks, Alma, for the opportunity. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Next, I'd like to introduce, wrong sheet. Next, I'd like to introduce Neil Burke. Neil is the program manager for the Charlotte Regional Transportation Planning Organization, which is the Charlotte Regional Transportation Planning Organization, known as CRTPO. Is the planning organization for the Charlotte urbanized area, which is a federal designation for urbanized areas. And he's also going to talk to us today about the Metropolitan Transportation Plan, which is a long-range plan. And he's going to explain the transportation priorities for the next 20 years here in Charlotte. So we can please welcome Neil Burke.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you for that introduction, Alma. Can everyone see my screen? It should be just the cover slide for my presentation, the 2050 Metropolitan Transportation Plan.
Yes, perfect. We can see it.
Awesome, thank you. Well, a little bit about what we're trying to do here is, so we started this planning effort in the summer of 2020, and we're required to do this plan every 4 years by the Federal Highway Administration. One of the biggest efforts with every time we develop the MTP is reaching out to groups throughout our planning area. And you know, the previous speaker said something that really struck me, and it's have a voice. That's really what we're doing today. Is we're providing this group information regarding a long-range transportation plan to ensure that your group and your constituents have a voice in the transportation planning process. A lot of times, residents don't feel as though they're informed on projects or transportation initiatives until the bulldozers show up. So again, that's really why we're reaching out to groups throughout our 3-county planning area. And I also thought it was an interesting statistic that there's 20% of the city of Charlotte population that's of Hispanic descent. That is one group that we are continually trying to target throughout our MTP development processes, but also just to make sure that they are engaged with CRTPO's daily activities, that they have an understanding of what our organization does and how they can get involved. So again, I am really grateful for this presentation to speak to you all this morning. I hope we can come back and continue to share information with you all. And I also hope that you can pass this information on to your constituents. So an overview of my presentation this morning, I'm going to give you some information about the CRTPO and the Metropolitan Transportation Plan. I'll highlight the key components of the Metropolitan Transportation Plan. I'll outline the plan development schedule. I'll identify ways for residents to stay involved, and I will address any comments and questions that this group has this morning. Sorry, I'm having an issue with some of my, I have a couple screens here open. I'm not sure what's going on. Is there someone on the Zoom that could advance my slides? I'm not sure why my computer's having this issue this morning.
If you want to stop sharing and then reshare, then that might
Okay.
solve the problem. While you're doing that, I just want to remind everyone, if you are watching this on Facebook, definitely like us and share the video with on your page. And if you have any questions or comments, feel free to put those in the chat. Thanks, everyone.
Can everyone see the what is CRTPO?
Yeah, perfect.
Okay, great. So we are the Charlotte Regional Transportation Planning Organization, and we're the Metropolitan Planning Organization for the Charlotte urbanized area. As you can see, we go beyond the city of Charlotte's boundaries. Our planning area encompasses all of Mecklenburg County, all of Iredell County, and Union County. And MPOs are federally designated, so they're designated by the U.S. Census urbanized areas, and they're required by federal law for all urbanized areas with population of greater than 50,000 people. And we do have other MPOs that join us. There's the Cabarrus-Rowan MPO to the east of us. They're headquartered out of Concord, and then there's the Gaston-Cleveland-Lincoln MPO in Gastonia. And there's also the Rock Hill-Fort Mill MPO. And we work closely with the other MPOs, but again, we're a 3-county MPO that's designated based upon the Charlotte urbanized area. All right, Judy let me know I'm not on camera. Again, I'm going to try to be on camera and advance the slides. It didn't work so well last time. CRTPO's role in the transportation planning process, the most critical role is we conduct transportation planning activities based upon the rules established by the federal government. We're also required to coordinate with regional agencies and engage the public. Probably the most important thing that we do is we allocate the federal transportation funds to eligible projects. We get a certain share of federal transportation funds based upon our planning area population, and we develop plans and processes to allocate those funds to roadway, bicycle, pedestrian, transit projects. And then we also maintain plans and programs in compliance with federal regulations. So the building blocks to the right are really the critical plans and processes of CRTPO. There's the comprehensive transportation plan, where the transportation system for the next 50 plus years is envisioned. It's really kind of a systems needs assessment. There isn't a financial component with that. What I'm talking to you all about today is the Metropolitan Transportation Plan. This is the plan we do every 4 years. It's a 20 plus year horizon where we prioritize projects based upon a defined set of criteria and develop a fiscally constrained plan based upon anticipated revenues coming into the planning area over the next 20 plus years. And then there's the Transportation Improvement Program. This is where we implement many of the high priority plans that we have identified in the Metropolitan Transportation Plan. So you can see that these three plans really build upon each other. And a critical component of these is that we have continuous resident input on the priorities for transportation throughout our 3-county area to really ensure that we're building the system that every resident in our planning area wants and needs.
Neil, I can advance the presentation if you want to stop share, and I will.
Judy, let's do it this way. I'll just not be on camera and I'll just kind of advance the slides. I'm really not, I have 3 monitors and for whatever reason, they're acting up this morning. So I'll just continue on with it this way. So an MTP stands for, as I mentioned before, the Metropolitan Transportation Plan. This is a long-range plan, as I mentioned, that establishes goals and objectives and priorities over the next 20 years. It considers all modes of surface transportation as well as impacts to the environment, the economy, public health, and overall quality of life. The plan must be fiscally constrained, which means the projects in the plan can be implemented using committed or anticipated revenues. And as I mentioned, the plan is updated a minimum of every 4 years. So some of the key components associated with this plan, and these are required by the, most of these are required by the federal government. We have to have goals and objectives. So that was one of the first things that we did beginning in the fall of last year, is we took a look at our goals and objectives from the 2045 MTP, and we made some changes to really ensure that our roadmap for this plan is consistent with the other regional priorities. You know, some of the regional priorities, you know, the city of Charlotte's considering, just how do we make our streets more multimodal? How do we provide equitable transportation for all of our residents? How do we coordinate with other regional agencies? And then the scenario planning component. This is where we look at different anticipated land use scenarios and the impact on the transportation system. So some of the scenarios we considered this time is the implementation of connected and autonomous vehicles, how that might affect the demand for transportation projects throughout our 3-county area. Different growth and development patterns in terms of adopted land use plans. What happens if we have dense development and infill instead of sprawl development? What types of transportation improvements would that necessitate? So we measured that. And then also, because we're developing this plan, you know, during the pandemic, we looked at different work from home trends in terms of removing a percentage of vehicles off of our transportation system and determining the types of improvements that are needed there. Performance management, that's another federally required component of this planning effort, really where we evaluate the operations of the system. We set performance targets and then we report results. So as I mentioned before, we have to have a financial plan, and the way we develop that is we look at the amount of revenue programmed to projects, transportation projects in our current transportation improvement program, and that's from 2020 through 2032. And then we developed some revenue projections from 2033 on to 2050. And that 2-step process gives us the total available revenue for the 2050 MTP. Project ranking is another key component. We have a 2-tiered project ranking methodology. The first tier evaluates the need with a set of quantitative criteria. The second tier measures the sustainabody. So we're looking at environmental justice. Does this project create a negative impact on the neighborhood that it's scoped in? Are there adverse impacts to natural resources or historic resources. One of the new criteria we added in tier 2 is equitable access. And this is looking at those environmental justice communities and actually measuring if a new project would benefit that environmental justice community by providing more direct access between job centers and that particular community. And then we have connectivity and benefit costs. So the financial plan and the project ranking process, that in combination delivers the project list. It basically tells us which projects we can afford, and we prioritize those projects based upon the rank in that 2-tiered criteria. So public involvement, as I mentioned, this is a continuous process for us. It's been a unique public involvement process with the 2050 MTP because we've had to do it all virtually. So we've relied heavily on our 2050 MTP website, ensuring that we're posting relevant material, ensuring that residents can easily find what they need. We held a virtual kickoff meeting webinar. We had over 100 attendees on that webinar in December. We've relied on Facebook and using geofencing to inform residents about the 2050 MTP. We've had an online survey, an interactive mapping tool, and then a multilingual toll-free hotline in 9 different languages for residents that may not speak English as their first language. So here's a video on project investments, and I'm happy to play it. I just want to make sure that we're doing okay on time. This is about a 3-minute video. Is that okay if we play this, or should we continue on due to time constraints? I see a thumbs up.
Yeah, I think we're good to play it.
Okay, great. I'll hit play. Judy, so I'm hitting play in the PowerPoint. Am I supposed to put this in the Vimeo screen?
Click on project investments,
Oh, okay.
and it should pull the link from there.
And then just play it in the window?
It should.
The Charlotte region has
Can everyone see
experienced
that?
incredible.
It didn't switch screens.
Over the past decade.
How about now? Can everyone see the video?
It's not showing the live screen.
That trend is projected.
All right. Well, Judy, you're going to have to help me because I'm not quite sure how to do this.
Okay. I'll just share my screen if you want and show it on mine and then send it back to you for the rest of the presentation.
That sounds good.
Okay.
Sorry about the technical difficulties, everybody.
You see the presentation on my screen?
Yes.
And let me know if you hear audio.
Not hearing audio.
The Charlotte region has experienced incredible growth over the past decade, and that trend is projected to continue for years to come. It's vital that we have an efficient transportation system that enhances quality of life and supports our thriving economy. Development of the CRTPO 2050 Metropolitan Transportation Plan, or MTP, is underway. One of the primary purposes of the MTP is to adopt a list of projects that address the transportation priorities identified for the region.
Development of this project list includes community input, evaluating the projects through a defined set of criteria, and receiving feedback from transportation professionals and elected officials throughout Iredell, Mecklenburg, and Union counties.
We're also working hard to engage as many people as possible in the transportation planning process, from all walks of life and all backgrounds. It's vital you review and comment on these projects to ensure your priorities are included. Get involved and have your voice heard.
Okay, switching back to my PowerPoint. Can everyone see the schedule overview slide?
Yes.
Great. Okay, so as I mentioned before, we began the update of the 2050 Metropolitan Transportation Plan last summer. We convened an advisory committee beginning last fall to help us update the goals and objectives, give us input on public involvement, and develop the project ranking criteria. We held a public comment period late in 2020 and it ended at the end of 2020. And then as you can see, much of the work to develop this plan is occurring throughout 2021 in terms of the financial assumptions, the project prioritization, developing the recommended project list, writing the report. And this effort will culminate in March of 2022 when our policy board for CRTPO adopts the 2050 MTP. So a little more detail about phases of public engagement. As I mentioned, we had the first phase, which is our public comment period. We held the webinar to really kick things off, and that ended at the end of December. So what we're doing right now between January and June is reaching out to groups like yours in terms of providing education and stakeholder outreach. We're working towards developing the draft MTP project list. In fact, Travis and I have a meeting at 10 to continue working with the subcommittee to rank those roadway projects that we received. So that'll be the second phase, or the third phase of public engagement, is really to seek comment on that draft MTP project list. So we want you all to stay in touch with us, and once that list comes out, review the list, make sure that your priority projects are included in that list. And again, we're happy to come back to Enlace to review the list and talk about next steps with you all. And then the fall of 2021, we're going to be conducting ongoing outreach. And then we'll have a final phase of public engagement on the draft MTP report in early 2022. So these are different ways as to how you can stay involved in the 2050 MTP development effort. There's our website, 2050mtp.org. As I mentioned, we have the toll-free hotline that's in 9 different languages. You can email us or follow us on social media, Facebook and Twitter. And so the next opportunity for input, this will be May and June of 2021. We'll be releasing an online survey that's accessible on our project website. And then, as I mentioned, June and July of 2021, we're seeking resident comments on the fiscally constrained project list. We have been coordinating with many of the other regional initiatives that are ongoing throughout our planning area. The previous speaker did mention the Charlotte Future 2040 Comp Plan. Again, many of the initiatives in terms of land use and transportation finance are related to that plan and some of the other plans on this list here. And that concludes my presentation. I'm happy to take any questions.
I don't see any other questions on the Facebook live page.
Okay, well, as I mentioned, it's really been a pleasure speaking with you all this morning. Sorry about some of those technical hiccups that we had, but again, we just encourage you all to stay in touch with us and remain engaged with the 2050 Metropolitan Transportation Plan. And if there's any way that you can forward this information on to your constituents, we'd be really grateful for that.
Thank you. Thank you for being with us today. I appreciate your time and for sharing that information with us and for all the work that you do for our community. Let's see. Maura had a comment. There's a comment in the chat from Judy. Let's see. Judy, do you want to unmute yourself for your comment that you had there?
Sure. So there was a question asking if we had any Spanish public meetings scheduled with CRTPO. So for the 2050 MTP, we will have a survey coming out in the May-June timeframe, and that will be available both in Spanish and English. And we'll be able to hold meetings in Spanish if that's needed during that open public comment period for the 2050 MTP. But also I wanted to share, we do have another project that is in a public comment period right now, and that's Beyond 77. And so there are 2 public meetings for that project scheduled. The first one is actually today at noon, and the second is on May 13th, also at noon. And those will be, you register for it and you can select if you want to attend in Spanish or English, and it's going to be live with both languages for those. And the survey for that project is also available in English and Spanish. And again, like Neil mentioned, with the toll-free hotline number, anyone can call that and leave a message, and we'll get back with them with information in whatever language it is they're requesting.
Perfect. Thank you, Judy. And we'll make sure to get that information, that link into our Facebook chat as well.
Great, thank you.
Perfect. If that's it, I just want to thank everyone for your time this morning. I hope you have a great rest of your week. And we'll see you next month for another presentation. Have a good day.